The first person Renata Preach threw off the bridge wasn't a trespasser. It wasn't a drunk teenager, and it wasn't some tourist causing trouble. It was Harold Jensen, 72 years old, retired mechanic, and the same man who'd spent almost every Saturday morning fishing from that bridge, longer than most Cedar Point residents had lived in the neighborhood. The wind was cutting across the water that morning, cold enough to keep most people inside. Not Harold, and not Renata. The new signs had gone up 3 days earlier. It said, HOA property, no fishing, residents only. Most people laughed when they first saw them. Harold didn't. When Renata told him to leave, he folded his chair. He picked up his tackle box, and he walked back toward the parking lot. He didn't say a word. Renata didn't move. She didn't apologize. The new signs had gone up 3 days earlier. It said, HOA property, no fishing, residents only. Most people laughed when they first saw them. Harold didn't. When Renata told him to leave, he folded his chair. He picked up his tackle box, and he walked back toward the parking lot. He didn't say a word. Renata didn't move. She didn't apologize. 3 months earlier, nobody in Cedar Point was talking about bridge rules, nobody was talking about fishermen, nobody was talking about enforcement. The bridge was just part of the lake. People crossed it every day without thinking about it. Kids rode bikes over it after school. Dog walkers stopped there in the evenings. Fishermen showed up before sunrise and left before breakfast. Nobody asked permission. Nobody needed to. I came back to Cedar Point the week after Memorial Day. My mother's house sat on the western shoreline, less than half a mile from the bridge. The place looked almost exactly the way I remembered it. Same marina, same bait shop, same faded community bulletin board covered with old notices, same coffee place overlooking the water, same group of retired men sitting outside every morning, discussing weather forecasts like they personally negotiated with the clouds. Mercer Lake hadn't changed much either. The water still stretched across the valley like a sheet of dark glass. The dock still groaned. The gulls still screamed. The first thing that felt different was a sign. Community asset, mounted beside the bridge entrance on 2 brand new posts. I stopped long enough to read it, then kept walking. At the time, it didn't seem important. That afternoon, I stopped by Harrison's Bait and Tackle. Walt Harrison sat in his usual chair, repairing a fishing reel. 80 years old, former Coast Guard. The kind of man who knew every boat on the lake by sight. Thought you moved away. I did. What happened? My mother needed help. He nodded. Then I pointed toward the bridge. What's with the sign? Walt didn't even look up. That was the first time I heard the name. The way he said it told me enough. Not angry, not surprised, just tired. Within 5 minutes, 3 different people had mentioned Renata Preach. Nobody seemed worried, mostly annoyed, like talking about a mosquito, something irritating, something temporary. Nobody realized she was just getting started. The monthly HOA meeting took place the following Saturday. Every chair in... At exactly 6 o'clock, the room went quiet. Renata Preach walked to the front, carrying a thick black binder. She wasn't loud. Most people who want control make a lot of noise. Renata didn't need to. She spoke slowly, calmly. Thank you all for coming. She opened the binder. For the next 40 minutes, she talked about standards, property values, community image, responsible stewardship. Nobody disagreed. Everything sounded reasonable. That was the trick. Renata never started with the thing she actually wanted. She started with the thing nobody could argue against. People nodded, people took notes. Renata stood alone near the front table, organizing paperwork. 1 page at a time. Slow, careful, methodical. Walt watched her from across the room. See that? What? She's not happy because the vote passed. I looked toward Renata. She was smiling to herself while stacking papers. Then why is she happy? Because now she gets to start. 2 weeks later, the second sign appeared. Authorized community activity only. Most residents didn't even notice it at first. They noticed when people started talking about it. Nobody seemed entirely sure what it meant. A fisherman asked. A jogger asked. One resident emailed the board for clarification. The response came from Renata. 3 paragraphs, 2 policy references, 1 reminder about protecting community assets. No actual answer. That became a pattern. Every question received a response. Very few received an explanation. By the middle of June, people started noticing Renata on the bridge every morning. Not walking, not exercising, inspecting, checking signs, checking trash bins, checking people. If somebody stopped too long, she noticed. If somebody leaned over the railing, she noticed. If somebody carried a fishing rod, she definitely noticed. At first, it was almost funny. Bridge Patrol, Queen Renata, Minister of Fishing Affairs. The jokes lasted about 3 weeks. Then they stopped. People slowly realized she wasn't joking. One Saturday morning, I watched her stop a teenager carrying a tackle box. "Going fishing?" Renata asked. "After work." "You know the bridge isn't a fishing area." "I work there." "That's not what I asked." The kid left. The bridge stayed quiet for the rest of the morning. That was new. The following month, the HOA newsletter changed. Now almost every issue mentioned the bridge. Bridge conduct, bridge preservation, bridge safety. The bridge had become the center of Renata's universe. Nobody understood why. Not yet. One evening, I printed every HOA email she had sent since becoming president. The stack ended up nearly 3 inches thick. I spread them across my kitchen table. Page after page, month after month. The same obsession. That was the first time something felt genuinely strange. The next afternoon, I mentioned it to Walt. "Ever notice how much she talks about that bridge?" Walt tightened a bolt, wiped his hands on a rag, then looked toward the water. "You know what used to be there?" "What?" "Before the bridge." "No. There used to be a fishing dock." "Public?" "Mostly." "What happened to it?" "The bridge happened." That answer stayed with me. For the first time, I found myself wondering whether Renata was protecting the bridge or trying to rewrite what it had always been. The first person Renata preached threw off the bridge wasn't a trespasser. It wasn't a drunk teenager. It wasn't some tourist causing trouble. It was Harold Jensen, 72 years old, retired mechanic, and the same man who'd spent almost every Saturday morning fishing from that bridge, longer than most residents had lived in the neighborhood. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning. 3 months earlier, nobody in Cedar Point was talking about bridge rules. Nobody was talking about fishermen. The bridge was just part of the lake. People crossed it every day without thinking about it. I came back to Cedar Point the week after Memorial Day. My mother's house sat on the western shoreline, less than half a mile from the bridge. The first thing that felt different was a sign, "Community Asset," mounted beside the bridge entrance on 2 brand new posts. I stopped long enough to read it, then kept walking. At the time, it didn't seem important. That afternoon, I stopped by Harrison's Bait and Tackle. Walt Harrison sat in his usual chair, repairing a fishing reel. I pointed toward the bridge. "What's with the sign?" Walt didn't even look up. Give her a month. A month for what? To start running everybody's life. Who? That was the first time I heard the name. The way he said it told me enough. Not angry, not surprised, just tired. Within 5 minutes, 3 different people had mentioned Renata Preach. Nobody seemed worried, mostly annoyed, like talking about a mosquito, something irritating, something temporary. Nobody realized she was just getting started. The monthly HOA meeting took place the following Saturday. Every chair inside the clubhouse was taken. People stood against the walls. At exactly 6 o'clock, the room went quiet. Renata Preach walked to the front, carrying a thick black binder. She wasn't loud. Most people who want control make a lot of noise. Renata didn't need to. She spoke slowly, calmly. "Thank you all for coming." She opened the binder. For the next 40 minutes, she talked about standards, property values, community image, responsible stewardship. Nobody disagreed. Everything sounded reasonable. That was the trick. Renata never started with the thing she actually wanted. She started with the thing nobody could argue against. People nodded. People took notes. Renata stood alone near the front table, organizing paperwork. 1 page at a time. Slow, careful, methodical. Walt watched her from across the room. "See that?" "What?" "She's not happy because the vote passed." I looked toward Renata. She was smiling to herself while stacking papers. "Then why is she happy?" "Because now she gets to start." 2 weeks later, the second sign appeared. Authorized community activity only. Most residents didn't even notice it at first. They noticed when people started talking about it. Nobody seemed entirely sure what it meant. A fisherman asked, a jogger asked. One resident emailed the board for clarification. The response came from Renata. 3 paragraphs, 2 policy references, 1 reminder about protecting community assets. No actual answer. That became a pattern. Every question received a response. Very few received an explanation. By the middle of June, people started noticing Renata on the bridge every morning. Not walking, not exercising, inspecting, checking signs, checking trash bins, checking people. If somebody stopped too long, she noticed. If somebody leaned over the railing, she noticed. If somebody carried a fishing rod, she definitely noticed. At first, it was almost funny. Bridge Patrol, Queen Renata, Minister of Fishing Affairs. The jokes lasted about 3 weeks. Then they stopped. People slowly realized she wasn't joking. One Saturday morning, I watched her stop a teenager carrying a tackle box. "Going fishing?" Renata asked. "After work." "You know the bridge isn't a fishing area." "I work there." "That's not what I asked." The kid left. The bridge stayed quiet for the rest of the morning. That was new. The following month, the HOA newsletter changed. Now almost every issue mentioned the bridge. Bridge conduct, bridge preservation, bridge safety. The bridge had become the center of Renata's universe. Nobody understood why. Not yet. One evening, I printed every HOA email she had sent since becoming president. The stack ended up nearly 3 inches thick. I spread them across my kitchen table. Page after page. Month after month. The same obsession. That was the first time something felt genuinely strange. The next afternoon, I mentioned it to Walt. "Ever notice how much she talks about that bridge?" Walt tightened a bolt, wiped his hands on a rag, then looked toward the water. "You know what used to be there?" "What?" "Before the bridge." "No?" There used to be a fishing dock. Public? Mostly. What happened to it? The bridge happened. That answer stayed with me. For the first time, I found myself wondering whether Renata was protecting the bridge or trying to rewrite what it had always been. The first time Renata publicly embarrassed someone, it happened over a fishing rod. Not a lawsuit, not a board meeting, not some dramatic confrontation. A fishing rod. It happened on a Saturday morning. The bridge was crowded. Tourists, residents, 3 kids trying to catch perch. The usual summer traffic. An elderly fisherman named Frank Delaney had set his tackle box beside the railing while helping his grandson untangle a line. Nobody thought twice about it. Then Renata arrived. She stopped beside the tackle box, looked at it, looked at Frank, then asked whether he had received the updated community activity guidelines. The bridge went quiet. Frank laughed. At first, most people assumed she was joking. Renata wasn't. She removed a folded paper from her binder and began reading aloud. Storage restrictions. The words sounded ridiculous. Even Frank thought so. Until she asked him to move. Right there, in front of everyone, including his grandson. Frank eventually picked up the tackle box. Not because he agreed, because he didn't want a scene. The grandson looked confused. The people watching looked uncomfortable. Renata looked satisfied. By lunchtime, the entire neighborhood knew. The story spread faster than a storm warning. People weren't talking about the tackle box. They were talking about Frank, a man who had been fishing that bridge for nearly 30 years and who had just been treated like a visitor. 3 days later, Renata found a new target. The new family from Illinois. The same family Harold had helped. Monday afternoon, Renata knocked on the door. Tuesday morning, the family received a violation notice. Wednesday evening, the father appeared at the clubhouse, carrying photographs, paint samples, receipts. Renata listened patiently, then informed him that exterior color modifications required prior approval. The father argued. Renata smiled. The father argued more. Renata smiled again. By the end of the conversation, the father was apologizing. Apologizing for painting his own front door. That story spread too. The children stopped riding their bikes near the clubhouse. Their parents stopped attending social events. Nobody missed the message. Monday afternoon, Renata knocked on the door. Tuesday morning, the family received a violation notice. Wednesday evening, the father appeared at the clubhouse, carrying photographs, paint samples, receipts. Renata listened patiently, then informed him that exterior color modifications required prior approval. The father argued. Renata smiled. The father argued more. Renata smiled again. By the end of the conversation, the father was apologizing. Apologizing for painting his own front door. That story spread too. The children stopped riding their bikes near the clubhouse. Their parents stopped attending social events. Nobody missed the message. At Harrison's Bait and Tackle, things weren't much better. Walt first noticed it on a Thursday afternoon. 2 fishermen were discussing repairs to a private dock. One of them suddenly lowered his voice. The other glanced toward the window. Then both stepped outside. Walt watched them leave. 5 minutes later, they returned. Only then did they continue talking, like they were afraid somebody might hear them. The fear wasn't imaginary. A week later, one of those fishermen received a phone call from Renata regarding the same dock, the same repairs, the same conversation. Nobody knew who reported it. Everybody started wondering. That question infected Cedar Point. Who reported it? Who told her? Who was listening? At first, the answer seemed obvious. Mrs. Gable. Then people started realizing the complaints multiplied so quickly, nobody could keep track. The bridge wasn't changing anymore. The people were. One evening, a teenager climbed onto the lower bridge railing, preparing to jump into the lake. He had done it dozens of times. Everybody knew that. Before he could jump, Renata appeared. Not later, not after. Before. Almost as if somebody had called her. The teenager's friends laughed, until Renata called his parents. Right there, on speakerphone, in front of everyone. The laughter disappeared immediately. The kid climbed down, his face turned red. The bridge fell silent. Nobody jumped again that day. That story reached every household before sunset. Parents loved it. Teenagers hated it. Renata didn't care. She had made her point. A month earlier, the bridge belonged to everybody. Now, people needed permission just to feel comfortable standing on it. The final straw came at the annual Lakeside Cookout, the biggest event of the summer. More than 80 residents attended. Kids played near the shoreline, boats drifted offshore, music echoed across the water. For years, it had been the closest thing Cedar Point had to a holiday. Halfway through the evening, Denise Harper mentioned her new lakeside deck project. Big mistake. Renata waited until everybody was listening, then casually asked whether the project had received architectural approval. The conversation died instantly. Denise froze. The answer was no. Renata knew it, Denise knew it, everybody knew it. But forcing her to admit it publicly was the point. The embarrassment lasted maybe 30 seconds. The damage lasted months. People stopped discussing projects after that, stopped sharing plans, stopped sharing ideas, stopped trusting one another. By August, Cedar Point looked cleaner than ever. Lawns trimmed, boats organized, trailers hidden, paint fresh, everything exactly where it belonged. And somehow, it felt worse. The neighborhood wasn't quieter because people were happy. It was quieter because people were careful. What's wrong? He looked toward the bridge, toward the lake, toward Renata's black SUV parked beside the clubhouse, then back toward the empty sidewalk. The bridge isn't hers. What do you mean? Walt kept watching the water. She's already got something bigger. What? For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then a resident crossed the street simply to avoid speaking with Mrs. Gable. Another turned around. The first family turned away by Renata's new system wasn't trying to break the rules. They were trying to go fishing. The Andersons arrived before sunrise. Pickup truck, boat trailer, 2 boys already wearing life jackets. The kind of family Cedar Point had been built around. They pulled into the launch area just after 5:30. The lake was calm. The sky was beginning to brighten. It should have been a perfect morning. Instead, the boys stopped talking. The father stared at him. The lake sat less than 100 feet away. He could literally see the water. Yet somehow, he wasn't allowed to reach it. The young man introduced himself as Kyle, 22, summer employee, new community access coordinator. Nobody knew what that title meant. Kyle seemed to enjoy it. The father eventually found the temporary pass Renata had mailed the week before. Kyle scanned it. Red. The scanner beeped. Access denied. One of the boys looked at his brother. The other looked at the lake. Neither understood what was happening. The father tried again. By noon, the story had reached Harrison's Bait and Tackle. By dinner, everybody knew. Not because of the gate, but because of the boys. People remembered the boys standing there in life jackets, while the lake sat on the other side of the barrier. That image stuck. 3 days later, Renata announced the Lake Access Program. Permanent decals, temporary decals, guest permits, boat launch registration, fishing access verification, approved shoreline areas, approved bridge fishing hours, approved bait guidelines. The room fell silent. People expected a gate. Nobody expected permission slips for a lake. Renata stood beside a projector screen. Calm, confident, completely serious. Then, she announced the approved bait list. At first,
one fisherman actually raised his hand. "You're telling me what bait I can use?" Several people chuckled. Renata smiled. "Only approved bait may be used within community-managed fishing zones." The room got quiet. Very quiet. The following Saturday, the annual father-son fishing derby took place. For 20 years, it had been one of Cedar Point's favorite traditions. No registration, no paperwork, no permits, just fishing. Renata changed that. By 7 o'clock, a line stretched from the gate all the way to the marina. Kyle stood in the middle of it like a customs officer at an international border. The first argument started before sunrise. An old man arrived with his grandson. Kyle stopped him. "Guest pass?" The old man blinked. "What?" "Guest pass for the child." People nearby started listening. The grandfather pointed at the boy. "That's my grandson." Kyle looked at the child, then at the line behind them. For a moment, it looked like he might let them through. Then Kyle's radio crackled. A voice spoke quietly. Nobody else could hear it. Kyle listened, looked toward the clubhouse. Renata stood near the registration tent, watching. Kyle's expression changed immediately. The smile disappeared. "Sorry, sir. Guest registration required." The boy's smile vanished. The grandfather looked toward Renata. Renata looked away. The old man turned around and walked back toward his truck. The boy followed. Neither said a word. Then came Rick. Rick had purchased worms from Walt less than an hour earlier. He walked toward the bridge carrying a small plastic bucket. Kyle stopped him. "Inspect the bait." Rick laughed. Kyle opened the bucket, compared the contents against a laminated reference sheet. "Looks fine." Rick spent the entire morning catching fish. By noon, he was leading the tournament. By 3 o'clock, he had won. The crowd applauded. Kids gathered around him. For a moment, Cedar Point felt normal again. Then Renata stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. The applause slowly faded. She smiled, opened a folder, and looked directly at Rick. "Before we present today's trophy, there is one compliance issue." Renata lifted a photograph. "Unauthorized bait." Silence. Complete silence. "The tournament committee has no choice. Mr. Rick Dawson is disqualified." A collective groan rolled through the marina. The trophy disappeared. The victory disappeared. Then came the favorite, Harold. The biggest moment of the summer happened during the championship day. More than 80 residents gathered near the bridge. Then Harold arrived. People noticed immediately. "Harold's here." Renata stepped down from the stage, walked directly toward Harold, handed him a permanent access badge. For a second, nobody spoke. Then somebody started clapping. Others joined in. The applause spread. 10 minutes later, Kyle's radio crackled. He listened. Then he walked directly toward Harold. Kyle held out a scanner. Scanned it. Green. Then the radio crackled again. Kyle listened. Scanned it a second time. Red. The scanner beeped. The crowd went. "Administrative review. Mr. Jensen's credential has been temporarily suspended pending compliance verification." A murmur rolled through the crowd. People stared in disbelief. Harold stood there holding the same tackle box he had carried for years. He looked toward the lake, then toward the bridge, then toward the crowd. He picked up the tackle box, turned around, and walked away. The crowd parted without a word. Only then did Renata return to the microphone. "Now," she smiled again. "Let's begin." The tournament started 10 minutes later. Kids cheered, boats launched, People pretended nothing had happened. But everybody remembered. Because for the first time, Cedar Point understood something. The gate wasn't there to protect the lake. The badges weren't there to organize fishing. They were there for one reason. Renata wanted to decide who belonged and who didn't. By the time the first orange sticker appeared, nobody was laughing about the fishing derby anymore. It sat on the gate keypad just after sunrise, centered, perfect edges. The adhesive crackled in the humidity. A county truck idled beside the stone entrance sign, hazard lights blinking. The worker tore off another sticker and watched the subdivision like he expected someone to come outside. A golf cart rolled past. No wave, no slowdown. By mid-morning, the second sticker appeared. This one on a boathouse door near the marina, bright orange against weathered cedar. A pontoon owner stopped on the dock. He adjusted his baseball cap, looked at the sticker once, and walked away. The lake stayed flat. Inside the clubhouse, Renata stood beside a folding table stacked with laminated compliance charts, mailbox colors, dock stains, fence heights. Renata highlighted one line and turned the page. The fan hummed in the corner, pushing warm air across the room. Mrs. Gable entered carrying a tray of red Solo cups. She set them down, straightened the stack, straightened it again. Renata closed the binder. Mrs. Gable remained standing beside the table. Outside, a group of homeowners gathered near the flagpole. Someone held a subdivision map, someone else a color swatch booklet. A man took a photo of the boathouse sticker from across the lawn. When Mrs. Gable approached, the group shifted. The map folded. The conversation thinned. She waved. One person nodded back. A cooler lid thumped shut behind them. At Harrison's Bait and Tackle, Walt sorted sinkers into a plastic tray. A fisherman entered, holding a photo on his phone. Not a fish, but the boathouse door. He showed it to Walt. Walt nodded once and kept sorting. The bait shop bell rang again. Mrs. Gable stepped inside. She bought a coffee and a pack of blueberry gum. The fisherman paused mid-sentence until she left. The bell stopped ringing. He finished the sentence, exactly where he had cut it. Outside, the lake breeze pushed a line of clouds toward the marina. By late afternoon, the third sticker appeared. This one on a mailbox with fresh red paint underneath, still glossy. It was the house on the corner. A neighbor carrying a trash bag slowed, looked at the mailbox, changed direction, and walked around the yard instead of passing in front. A golf cart drifted down the street. The driver stared at the mailbox as he rolled past. No wave. Mrs. Gable stepped outside, holding a stack of committee folders. She paused at the end of the walkway. The folder stayed tucked beneath her arm. The sticker fluttered once. A porch light clicked on across the street. She turned, walked back inside. The door closed softly. The street stayed quiet. Denise opened Facebook before work. Cedar Point Residence Group. 12.4K members. Comments disabled. Reactions disabled. Posting disabled. Only administrators. At the top, Renata Preach, Group Administrator. A small flame emoji beside her name. A banner under it. Community standards updated. Around noon, a resident tried to post a question. A short line of text, a blurry photo of a mailbox. The post appeared, refreshed once, then vanished. No alert, no email, no explanation. Just gone. At Harrison's Bait and Tackle, Walt heard the same sentence from 3 different customers. It lasted maybe 6 minutes. Nobody had read the post. Everybody knew it existed. A fisherman in a camo jacket scrolled through his phone with his thumb. Another leaned on the cooler full of ice, pretending to check bait prices. A third whispered something near the spinner racks. The bait shop bell kept ringing. Walt didn't look up. The new community newsletter arrived the next morning.
A stack sat on a folding table beside the clubhouse coffee urn. Denise picked one up. Marina cleanup? No Gable. Committee volunteers? No Gable. Shoreline project? No Gable. She turned the page. Still nothing. The back cover showed Renata standing beside a cooler of bottled water at last month's event. The caption read, "Leadership in Action." Denise folded the newsletter and set it back down. A corner of the stack lifted in the lake breeze. A meeting notice appeared on the bulletin board outside the clubhouse. Community meeting. Residents welcome. A small asterisk beside the line. Board discussion session, closed. Committee review, closed. Voting review, closed. Open, but not open. A gust of lake wind lifted the corner of the paper. Someone pinned it down with blue painter's tape. By Friday afternoon, a screenshot started circulating. A deleted post. White background, black text. No profile photo, no timestamp. Just a line about recent concerns. Nobody knew who saved it. Everybody had seen it. A golf cart rolled past the marina with the screenshot open on the passenger's phone. A teenager at the bait shop zoomed in, then locked his screen when someone walked by. The screenshot moved faster than the original post. That evening, the Facebook group changed again. A new pinned post appeared at the top. Community misinformation policy. Comments turned off. Reactions turned off. A second post appeared. Comments off. A third. Comments off. Denise scrolled. Every new post looked the same. Gray text, blue header, no place to speak. She closed the app. At the marina, two fishermen stood beside a pontoon with the engine idling at its lowest setting. One held the screenshot printed on regular copy paper. The other looked around before reading it. He folded the page, slipped it into his jacket pocket. The pontoon engine hummed. A gull landed on the railing. Neither man spoke. Meeting night arrived with more cars than usual. Pickup trucks lined the grass near the overflow lot. Golf carts filled the sidewalk. A county vehicle parked near the entrance with its hazard lights blinking. Inside, every chair was taken. People stood along the back wall. A stack of newsletters sat untouched on a folding table beside a cooler of iced tea bottles. Renata flipped through her binder at the front of the room. A page turned. Another. Someone in the second row held the screenshot folded in half. Someone else kept glancing at the door. Renata saw the screenshot. She turned another page. The room stayed quiet. When the meeting ended, the chairs emptied quickly. The microphone clicked off. The last few residents drifted toward the exit. A stack of newsletters remained on the table. Someone picked one up, opened it, checked the pages. No photo of Gable. They folded the newsletter and set it back down. The lights shut off one row at a time. The room went still. The meeting ended just after 9. Chairs scraped against the concrete floor. Folders snapped shut, with a sound like pistol shots in the quiet room. People drifted toward the exit in slow, uneven lines. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody spoke. Outside, the parking lot glowed beneath the harsh yellow floodlights, turning the asphalt into a stage. A few residents lingered beside their cars, anchored by the cold night air. One man, a truck door slammed near the overflow lot. The metal-on-metal sound echoed across the dark water. The trucks pulled away, one by one, headlights cutting through the trees, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and damp grass. The next morning, the Facebook group was a graveyard of silence. A new post sat pinned at the top. Renata Preach, administrator. A long, sterile paragraph about community values. Another about the necessity of transparency. A final, threatening plea for respectful dialogue. At the gas station near the highway, a pickup truck idled beside Pump 4. Dust coated the rear window, thick and gray. Someone had traced a sentence into the grime with a fingertip. "Show us the authority." A man filling his tank glanced at the glass, looked away, then looked back, longer this time. The letters stayed. A second truck pulled in behind him. Same sentence, written smaller in the lower corner of the tailgate, pressed into the road salt. Nobody spoke. The pumps clicked. The wind rattled the empty paper cups near the trash can. At the clubhouse, the atmosphere had curdled. A resident approached the front desk carrying a leather-bound notepad.
He asked for documents. CC&R, master deed, restrictive covenants, easement records. The volunteer behind the desk typed into a laptop, looked at the screen, typed again. A slip of paper printed from the small thermal machine. Request received. No documents. No copies. No folder. The resident folded the slip into his pocket and walked out, his stride stiff. By the end of the afternoon, 4 more residents submitted the same request. They all left holding identical slips. Request received. Nothing else. A copy of one receipt appeared on the bulletin board beside the clubhouse entrance. Someone pinned it there with a heavy thumbtack. By dinner, 3 people had photographed it. The next morning, the thumbtack remained, but the receipt had been snatched away. Only a small, jagged hole in the corkboard remained. A curl of thermal paper lay on the ground, trampled into the mud near the trash can. Inside the clubhouse, the printer was a constant rhythmic menace. Whir, click. Whir, click. Small strips of thermal paper curled into the plastic tray. Request received. Request received. Request received. The volunteer emptied the tray twice before lunch, but the machine kept going. That afternoon, they found the old binder in a storage cabinet behind the kitchen. Dust covered the front like a shroud. The label had faded to a ghost of its former self. One hinge showed rust. Inside sat a CCR from 30 years ago. A signature, a county stamp, a subdivision map printed in clear blue ink. People gathered around the table. Nobody spoke. Pages turned slowly, reverently. Fingers paused on margins. Someone took a photograph. Someone else took another. The binder stayed open. By sunset, the binder wasn't the only thing circulating. A stack of low-quality photocopies appeared on a picnic table near the marina. Black streaks blurred the edges. A faint, jagged line ran down the center where the paper had been slightly wrinkled. The missing page, the one Renata had scrubbed from the new version, was circled in heavy black pen. Another copy sat on the windshield of a golf cart. Another inside a shopping basket at the market near the highway. Another taped to the side of a mailbox with blue painter's tape. No phones, no screenshots, paper only. A fisherman wearing mirrored sunglasses picked up a copy from the marina bench. He held it to the light, checking the words, the date, the signature. He folded it once, slipped it into his jacket, and walked into the dark. Outside the clubhouse, 2 residents stood beside a pickup with the tailgate down. A photocopy rested on top of an igloo cooler. One pointed at a paragraph. The other pointed at the signature page. The date appeared in conversations. At the marina, at the gas station, at the clubhouse parking lot. The same sheet kept showing up. Different hands, same page. That evening, Denise sat at her kitchen table. 2 documents lay in front of her. The old CCR, the new CCR. Same cover, same title, same formatting. 1 page, missing. She aligned the corners, checked the page numbers, checked them again. The gap stayed. She placed the old version on top, then the new one, then reversed them. The missing section didn't reappear. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, casting rhythmic shadows across the room. Later that night, a golf cart rolled down Lakeshore Drive. The engine was off. 2 residents sat inside, coasting silently, the momentum of the hill carrying them toward the water. A photocopy of the missing page was taped to the dashboard, crooked, edges torn and sharp. They compared the pages in the dim light. A finger tapped the margin of the old version. Another finger tapped the same location on the new one. That's not the same document. Neither moved. A pontoon engine hummed somewhere across the lake. The next morning, Renata finally reacted. A special newsletter appeared in mailboxes. Thicker paper, different layout. A bold, screaming header. Emergency Community Communication. Inside sat a message about unity, a message about trust, a message about the dangers of misinformation. No mention of the missing page, no mention of the binder, no mention of authority. The newsletter reached mailboxes before sunrise. By 8 o'clock, copies sat open on kitchen counters throughout Cedar Point. One rested beside a bowl of cereal, another beside a tackle catalog. People flipped through the pages. Unity, trust, community standards. They kept turning. Nothing about the missing page. By noon, several copies had already been abandoned. One sat on a picnic table near the marina, another on a folding chair outside the clubhouse. A lake breeze turned the pages without help. Nobody chased them. Nobody picked them up. A second notice appeared on the clubhouse door. Special meeting. Urgent. Attendance encouraged. People photographed it, texted it, printed it. But the question had already changed form. Not spoken. Not whispered. Not posted. Written. On trucks. On photocopies. On mailbox tape. Show us the authority. That night, Denise sat at her kitchen table again. The ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, a hypnotic, steady beat. The 2 documents remained in front of her. Same cover, same title. 1 page missing. She stacked them carefully, aligned the edges, pressed them flat. A single page lifted in the breeze from the fan. The missing one. It rose, settled, rose again. Then a gust from the open kitchen window hit it. The paper flew. It cleared the table, cleared the chair, and vanished into the blackness of the night outside. Denise watched the empty space where it had been, the window now framing only the dark, restless lake. The ceiling fan kept turning. Morning fog clung to the lake, like a sheet pulled tight. The bridge was only a silhouette, the planks barely visible through the gray. A fisherman crossed it slowly, boots damp, thermos steaming in the cold air. Something white fluttered against the railing. He stopped, pulled it free. A single sheet of paper, edges creased, ink smudged. At the top, in faded black letters, Coal Lake Trust. He read it once, then again, folded it, slipped it into his jacket. The fog swallowed him as he walked on. Another taped to the dashboard of a pickup near the boat ramp. Same page, same title, same smudged line under the header. People picked it up, held it to the light, turned it sideways, read the name. Coal Lake Trust. Nobody understood it. But now, they had something they could touch. A woman at the marina folded her copy into thirds. A man at the bait shop slid his into a tackle box. A teenager taped one inside his locker at the community gym. The name moved through the town like weather. One copy appeared beneath the windshield wiper of a county truck. Nobody claimed it. Nobody removed it. Late afternoon, a pickup truck sat parked near the pontoon dock, tailgate down. 4 residents stood around it. On the metal surface, the old subdivision map, the county map, the photocopy, a ruler, a pen, a folded CCR. The wind lifted the corners.
Hands pressed them flat. A finger traced a line on the old map. Another finger traced the same line on the county version. The two lines didn't match. A parcel number appeared in one place, another in a different place. A boundary shifted by inches, then by feet. Nobody spoke. The maps did the talking. Harold arrived just before sunset. Baseball cap, old jacket, 40 years on the lake etched into his posture. Someone handed him a copy. He held it at arm's length, squinted. Then he looked toward the bridge. The fog had lifted. The planks were visible again. He tapped the page with one finger. I haven't heard that name in years. He didn't elaborate. He didn't stay. He walked back to his truck, closed the door, drove away. The copy remained in his hand. Just after dark, someone found a shoebox in the clubhouse storage room. Old photos, Polaroids, faded prints from the 80s. Kids on the bridge, a small aluminum boat tied to a post, a wooden sign nailed to the railing. The sign read, Coal Lake Trust. The ink cracked, the wood warped, but the letters, clear. Someone circled the name with a red pen. Someone else took a picture of the picture. The photo passed from hand to hand. Nobody said a word. By evening, the community had a new obsession. The old question, show us the authority, faded. A new one took its place. Who is Coal Lake Trust? It appeared on the back of a pickup, on the marina bulletin board, on a bait shop receipt, on the photocopies, on a mailbox, on a cooler lid, on a folded CCR. The name spread like fog. The question spread faster. Night settled over the pontoon dock, water black and still. A flashlight beam cut across the planks. Someone knelt beside a stack of papers. The old photo, the photocopy, the circled name. The beam moved to Harold, standing a few steps back, hands in his jacket pockets. Someone asked him quietly, what was Coal Lake Trust? Harold didn't answer at first. He looked at the bridge, at the dark water beneath it, at the fog returning from the far shore. Then he spoke. I thought they were gone. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The flashlight flickered. The lake breathed. The papers trembled in the wind. Cut to black. Denise pulled into the county office just after sunrise. Cold lake wind, frost on the grass. A Ford F-150 with Michigan plates parked crooked near the entrance. Inside, the place felt like every county building in the state. Buzzing lights, thin carpet worn down to the backing, the smell of wet coats and old paper. She didn't sit, didn't greet the clerk. Trust records. He typed, opened a metal drawer that screeched like a snowplow blade, pulled a thin file, pushed it across the counter. No questions. Denise took it and walked out. She opened the file on the hood of her car, the metal still cold from the night. Pages missing, names blacked out, dates cut off. A faded Ingham County stamp, a signature she didn't know, a transfer line with half the text gone. She closed the file, drove off, tires crunching on frozen gravel. The attorney's office sat above a hardware store that sold bait in the winter and snow shovels year-round. Narrow stairs, cold railing, bell too loud. He didn't shake her hand, didn't smile, just nodded at the chair. Denise set the file down. He opened it, read, turned pages with the slow, steady movements of someone who'd lived through too many Michigan winters. Then he reached for the old CCR, then the new one, then the map, then the photocopy. He didn't speak. Finally, the trust wasn't dissolved. He turned another page. Ownership transferred. He closed the file, pushed it back to her. That's all I can say. Denise took it, left. Outside, the wind off the lake cut straight through her Carhartt jacket. At the clubhouse, Renata sat behind her desk. Blinds half closed, cold coffee, stacks of paper. The hum of the old HVAC unit that never worked right in winter. 2 residents walked in. They didn't sit. They opened the file in front of her, showed her the trust line, showed her the transfer. Renata stared at the page. Too still. Too quiet. She closed the file, closed her laptop, closed the door. The latch echoed down the hallway like a boat rope snapping in the wind. By afternoon, the community understood. They weren't chasing a document anymore. They were chasing a person, the successor. The search spread fast. At the bait shop, Walt dug through old receipts stained with fish scales. At the marina, someone checked boat logs from summers long gone. At the gym, a teenager scrolled through archived posts on a cracked phone. At the county building, a volunteer opened the microfilm cabinet that smelled like dust and lake water. On Lakeshore Drive, a golf cart stopped at every mailbox, tires crunching on salt. People found scraps, a half-visible name on a permit, an address on the back of a folded map, a phone number missing digits, a signature that didn't match anything, a date that didn't fit. Nothing connected. Nothing answered the question. But nobody stopped. That night, Denise sat at her kitchen table, the file open, the photocopy beside it, the old photo, the map, the CCR. She pulled a thick envelope from a drawer, placed the documents inside, added a letter, not an email, not a message, a letter. She sealed the envelope, pressed the flap, wrote the address, a rural route, another state, a name she hoped was right. She walked to the mailbox at the end of her driveway. The metal door was cold enough to sting her fingers. She placed the envelope inside, raised the red flag. Then she went back inside, boots leaving wet prints on the entry mat. The letter was gone by morning. The community waited. People gathered at the marina, at the bait shop, at the clubhouse, on porches, in driveways, hands in pockets, breath visible in the cold. They talked in low voices. He'll shut the bridge. He'll sell the land. He'll fence the shoreline. He'll sue the HOA. He'll take the lake. Nobody knew. A rural road, another state, wind pushing through the pines. A mailbox leaned from winter frost heave. The red flag was up. A pickup rolled in. Engine off. Door opened. A hand reached inside. Pulled out bills, flyers, then the thick envelope. Cedar Point on the return address. The hand turned it over, held it still. The wind rattled the metal door of the mailbox. Somewhere in the woods, a crow called once. The envelope stayed in that hand, unmoving. My house sits deep in the Upper Peninsula. Pines, cold air. A long gravel drive still wet from the night. I open the mailbox. Bills, a hardware flyer, one thick envelope. Inside the kitchen, I tear it open. Coal Lake Trust. Bridge, lake access, HOA, parcel numbers, maps. A letter I don't recognize. I read it twice. I still don't understand half of it. It doesn't feel like an inheritance. It feels like something I have to deal with. I set the papers down, pick up the phone. A law office answers. Flat tone. I think you sent this to me, I say. A pause. Paper shuffling. No, sir, we didn't. I hang up. Look at the envelope again. I grab my jacket. Keys, wallet, envelope. Lock the door behind me. The pickup starts on the second try. Cold engine, old battery. I pull onto the road. Pines on both sides. Miles of nothing. 3 hours. 4 hours. gas station coffee, a stale donut, a stretch of highway with no radio signal. I just need to sign and go home. I park outside the attorney's office, kill the engine, take the envelope with me. Cold stairs, dust on the railing, a bell that rings too loudly when I open the door. The attorney doesn't shake my hand, doesn't smile. He opens the trust file, pulls out the map, flattens it with one palm. A faded county stamp, a transfer line, a signature. The trust was never dissolved, he says. Another sheet. Ownership transferred. Another. The bridge, the shoreline access, the original parcel. All of it followed the property.
I lean back. So, it's mine? Legally? Yes. He slides one last document across the desk. Most homes around that lake were sold with bridge and shoreline access. If ownership changes, lenders start asking questions. Insurance companies start asking questions. Future buyers start asking questions. He closes the file. The board doesn't want the bridge. They want certainty. They've been looking for you for months. I nod once. I leave the office. Walk across the lot. Wind cuts through my jacket. The clubhouse sits down the road. Lights on. Cars parked tight. I step inside. The boardroom looks prepared hours earlier. Water bottles, folders, name cards. A tray of untouched cookies. Coffee gone cold.
Renata greets me with a professional smile. No hostility, no pressure, just business. We'd like to purchase the property. She slides a folder across the table. The house. Another page. The lot. Another. The shoreline easement. Another. The bridge access rights. Everything. I look at the number. Look again. It's a lot. More than I expected. Renata watches me. The board watches me. Nobody speaks. Fine, I say. A few people exchange glances. If that's what the community wants. Silence. Then Renata nods. We can finalize everything tomorrow night. I flip through the contract, barely reading. Board meeting? Tomorrow evening. I close the folder, stand, leave. The lake wind hits me as soon as I step outside. Cold. Sharp. I zip my jacket and start walking. The bridge sits ahead of me. I stop. Look at it. Weathered boards, old railings, fishing line tangled around a post. I keep walking. The old house stands farther down the shoreline. Paint peeling, porch sagging, one shutter hanging crooked. I slow down. One step. A woman watering a planter looks up. That used to be your grandparents' place. I nod. Keep moving. Harold sits on a bench overlooking the water. Baseball cap, hands in his jacket pockets. I almost walk past him. Your grandfather used to fish right here, he says, every Sunday. I look at the lake, then at the empty stretch of shoreline, then back at him. I nod once. Walk on. Night settles over Cedar Point. A single lamp lights the kitchen of the old house. On the table, the HOA contract, the purchase offer, a framed photograph of my grandfather. I walk past the table, straight to the porch. Cold boards creak under my boots. The lake is dark. The bridge barely visible. A voice carries across the water. A child. Excited. Loud. I got one! Another child laughs. The rods bounce. The bridge shakes. The sound carries over the water. I rest both hands on the porch railing. and watch. Silent. The board meeting starts with every chair taken. Folding chairs scrape the linoleum as people squeeze in. A few stand along the walls with styrofoam cups from the lobby coffee urn. Others wait in the hallway, leaning against the doorframe under the exit sign. The HVAC kicks on overhead, loud enough to vibrate the ceiling tiles. Through the windows, the bridge sits dark against the lake. I walk in with the contract under my arm. Renata is already at the front table. County binders stacked beside her, laminated agendas, a plastic pitcher of water with condensation running down the sides, a pen placed beside the signature line. Everything looks official, small town official. The attorney clears his throat, the way attorneys do when they want the room quiet. He opens the old CCR binder, then the new one, then the missing page. The missing page wasn't about ownership, he says. His voice echoes off the fluorescent lights. He turns the page toward the room. It was about access. Nobody moves. Someone shifts their folding chair. A bottle cap clicks open. A phone vibrates once and is immediately silenced. The bridge could be owned. He taps the page with the back of his pen. It could never be closed. A low sound moves through the room. Not talking, not relief, just breath. Renata slides the contract toward me anyway. Her HOA badge swings slightly on its lanyard. The purchase agreement still stands. She places the pen beside it. Whenever you're ready. I pick it up. The room goes still. Even the HVAC seems to quiet down. A door opens behind me. Cold air moves through the hall. Outside, a little boy breaks free from his mother's hand and runs across the grass. An older man stands beside a pickup truck with the tailgate down. The boy hits him at full speed. The man laughs, catches him, lifts him off the ground. The boy wraps both arms around his neck. Heat hits the back of my neck. Boards under my sneakers. The bridge. The lake. Running. My grandfather's hands, catching me before I fall. The room comes back. The contract is still there. The pen is still in my hand. Renata is still waiting, fingers resting on her clipboard. I look through the window at the bridge, then at Harold, then at the children outside. I set the pen down. When I got your letter, I thought this was property. Nobody speaks. Someone coughs into their sleeve. I was wrong. Renata's face doesn't move. I push the contract back across the table. My grandfather never kept people away from this place. Outside, the boy is still laughing. This bridge stays open. The room holds its breath. Harold lowers his head. Denise presses her hand to her mouth. Walt looks out the window like he's checking the weather. Renata reaches for the contract, slides it back into the binder without a word. I stand, leave it on the table, walk outside. The air smells like lake water and cold grass. The flagpole rope clinks against the metal as the wind shifts. The bridge lights come on as I reach the shoreline. 2 kids lean over the railing with fishing rods. Harold sits on the bench nearby, hands deep in his jacket pockets. I stop beside the old post where the paint has worn down to bare wood. Across the lake, the clubhouse windows glow behind me. Ahead, the water moves quietly under the bridge. The kids keep fishing. Nobody tells them to leave.